The Wee Folk and the Celebration of Spring. The kind witch of the woods was tending to her garden one fine spring morning. The lantanas all seemed to have bloomed overnight, and as she watered them she paused to admire their colorful display of petite flowers. They grew in clusters like a bouquet that would fit perfectly in the hands of a doll, or the wee folk. At that thought, the kind witch set down her watering can and picked up her gardening shears. She gathered only the tiniest flowers she could find, and brought her cuttings into the cottage, where she made floral arrangements dainty enough to be held between her thumb and forefinger in a gentle pinch. She wrapped each of them in a small square of parchment and tied them with a thin ribbon. The kind witch smiled at her handiwork, then set them down with care on her bookshelf, right at the doorstep of the doll-sized house at its center. Though she was unable to see the wee folk with her human eyes, she believed wholeheartedly that they existed, and hoped that whoever lived in the bookshelf liked her offerings. Later that morning, Fable threw her hands to her mouth with a delighted gasp when she opened her door to the sight of those beautiful bouquets. There were 5 in total, each with its own unique arrangement. She could not choose a favorite, but her mind immediately wandered to 4 wonderful friends who would love them just as much as she did. When Sparrow the mailman fairy made his daily delivery route to the cottage, Fable handed him 4 letters to send out to Wick, Oakley, Bello, and Dew. Enclosed in each envelope was an invitation to a springtime arts and crafts day she would host on the cottage porch. The next day, the friends gathered. As the invitations had instructed, each one of them had brought a few of their own supplies for a craft activity. Wick arrived first, having to only climb down from the cottage mantel. He brought wax pellets and cotton rope braids in case anyone was interested in learning to make candles. Bello and Oakley arrived together from their homes at the Vale. Bello carried a basket with jars of salt and flour, while Oakley offered powdered paint pigments she had grinded up the night before from colorful plants and rocks. Dew was the last to arrive, climbing as quickly as she could from the wishing well by the kind witch's garden. She brought with her several glass vials filled with shimmering well water. Fable greeted each of her friends with a warm smile and an enthusiastic wave as she welcomed them to the cottage porch. The space looked especially inviting this time of year, for the kind witch of the woods kept potted plants everywhere she could fit them and hung wind chimes from the awning. They carried the sweet music of the breeze. There were also crystals dangling from strings that refracted sunlight into rainbows that danced all around the porch walls. At the base of one of the largest plant pots, Fable had set up round tables she'd constructed from jar lids. At the center of each table was a vase containing the flowers she had received at her doorstep. The friends chose the table with their favorite floral arrangement to set up their chosen activity. Oakley, like the kind witch of the woods, was drawn to the lantanas. Their rounded shape and bright colors caught her artistic eye. She could barely look away from the blooms as she laid out paintbrushes and blank sheets of paper. Bello placed his salt and flour jars by a vase of creamy white yarrow. For his craft, he planned to make salt dough and show his friends how to press it into shallow dishes to hold small items. Dew sat at the table next to Oakley, hardly even noticing the arrangement of sweet alyssum in front of her, as she was so preoccupied with her excitement of being invited to the gathering. She offered a jar of well water to her friend to activate the paint pigments, then another jar to Bello, so that he could mix the flour and salt into a soft clay. She explained that the well water was infused with a bit of wish magic to add an extra touch of enchantment to their projects. Bello ended up pushing his table next to Dew's and Oakley's, and the 3 had great fun sculpting and painting together. Wick contentedly sat by himself at a table that displayed a bouquet of forget-me-nots. Their blue petals reminded him of the ocean, and the yellow centers looked like shining suns. He gazed at them, fondly remembering his trip to the beach, then smiled as Fable sat down beside him with an armful of Oakley's paints and Bello's salt dough that she had shaped into smooth, flat stones. She painted one of the soft stones with a yellow circle surrounded by a ring of blue, just like the forget-me-nots, and set it in front of Wick. After that, they painted all of the salt dough stones to look like flowers, using every available color of paint. Their table looked like a spring meadow by the time they were done. When all of the crafts were completed, Bello showed his friends to a warm corner of the porch where their projects could air dry and harden in the sunshine. As they admired each other's creations, Bello noticed the abandoned container of beeswax pellets that Wick had brought, and, knowing what a talent Wick had for candle making, begged him to show everyone the craft he had planned for the day. Wick felt a bit bashful at first, but agreed to do a demonstration. He poured the pellets into a thimble, and with the power of his thoughts created a small, contained fire beneath it. Slowly the wax melted into a very hot liquid. Wick dipped the braided cotton into it, over and over, then carefully laid the wax string over a nearby stick and repeated the process until several skinny taper candles had formed. Dew and Oakley watched with quiet fascination, and Bello asked a few thoughtful questions about the process, while Fable smiled to see all of her best friends get along so well. Wick found himself feeling much pride and joy at the interest they all showed in his skill. Finally, the Arts and Crafts Day had to come to an end. Fable started to clean up, but her guests insisted on taking care of it for her since she had done such a wonderful job planning and setting up such a lovely day for them. As they folded the tablecloths and chose among themselves which beautiful flower bouquet they would each take home, Fable stepped into the cottage to gather 5 teacups and prepare a pot of chamomile tea. When the tea had been brewed and everyone had been served a cup, the wee folk sat in a row, their tiny feet dangling over the edge of the porch, and watched the sky turn pink and purple with the setting sun. Though no one said it out loud, they all quietly agreed that this had been their favorite day in a season of wonderful days, and hoped that they could all do this again soon. The end.